Well, look who it is. Nice crossbow.
Vanya, good to see you.
Did you find your friend?
No, we missed him unfortunately. Varian, Bryn, how are you all? What is that smell?
That's Bryn.
You missed all the action.
Action?
We tracked the beast to its lair last night.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the podcast. My name is Dave and I'm joined as ever by my good friend Ian.
Hello there.
And we today are going to talk about Wintermark with a very, very nice gentleman. If you'd like to introduce yourself, we will begin.
Hello, my name is one of many names. My name is Andrew Riddick. My name is also Pud, and I'm also Tarek of Wintermark, Hall of Wintermark. Nice to be here, guys.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to fanboy out a little bit because we are big fans of you, and we're like, you've kind of even very early on in our kind of experience at Empire gave us some really good like hooks that really made us feel like the game was alive and we were a part of it. So like, yeah, we're going to try and pick up, please.
I know. So we should probably say, and you perform and you have done many, many great songs in, we're used to the Songs and Stories Circle, but of course we've seen you around Wintermark as well and other areas of the nation. So you're kind of if you like, a bardic kind of character of the nation. And am I right in saying that is a term known as a scop in Wintermark?
Yeah.
Ian, you're playing it so cool, man. I'm so impressed by you there. You just kept it level and professional and got through that sentence really well, bud. I'm very proud of you today.
Is that a scop? I believe they're scops, yeah?
Let me just quickly check my notes. I think that's called a scop. Let's start with a tough question immediately, right? Because I think we could get bogged down so much in like just appreciating like the ambient nature of a song being sung in a bar and the effect that has. But we're not going to do that, Ian. We're not going to do that. We're going to move on and we're going to get into Wintermark for all you would-be Wintermarkers or Wintermarkers that know Wintermark and are just here to hate on us. I have a bone to pick immediately, straight off the bat with Wintermark.
Hi, God did it.
No, well, it might be PD's fault. Yeah. So there I am in my 5 minutes of research I wanted to do before we recorded this. I went on the wiki and I was like, I wonder what archetypes they have. And they have a bunch of really interesting ones, right? There's so many like cool ones, like the maggot, who is someone who picks up gear off other people on the battlefield. Your enemy on the battlefield is like a scumbag. You have like a mediator type thing. Incredible. And I was like, there's 10 of them, right? And I was like, wow, that's so cool. I don't think Navarre has that many. Do you know how many we have, Ian?
Got 3, I think.
5.
5, okay. Yeah.
5. They have double.
To be fair, there is basically like 3 nations that make up Wintermark in a way. Or that's the aspect of it. So
don't answer, Ian. That's the hardest hitting question we're going to have tonight.
I know.
Let Pud answer it, man. Now he's sweating. Now put him on the back foot. Now he knows exactly who's in charge of this podcast. You know, Pod, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't speak entirely on the design decisions of PD, but I think you hit it on the nail on the head in that, because there's the 3 nations and every nation. Well, to backtrack, 3 people, 1 nation is the whole thing that you'll hear Wintermark shout a lot. We like doing our call and repeat shouts. That's one of our biggies. 3 people, 1 nation. And yeah, so within that you've got the Calavesi, the Stein, and the Suak. And I think every imperial nation has its own subset. So the subgroups, like the League has their different cities, there's different chapters. The different nations subdivide in different ways. Wintermark I find interesting, and it's one of the reasons why me and my group chose Wintermark, is because, to my mind, they're really distinct. They're 3 very distinct nations, which, and again, this might be born out of familiarity more than anything else, but I find them more distinct than, say, the League cities, which I think is an equivalent denomination. I know they're more geographic based rather than just cultural based, but it's the first thing that's coming to mind. Yeah, because you've got your Steiner, which are very heavily based on your Rohirrim. Definitely not Vikings. Definitely not Vikings.
Definitely not Viking folk.
But it's fair to say that they share a lot of cultural influence from Viking, Saxon culture, or more like Skyrim Nords, Rohirrim from Lord of the Rings. That stuff.
Skyrim, definitely. That's the 100% the
massively.
vibe. Yeah.
Then you've got your Suak, who have more of a like a First Nation Native American type vibe, with some Inuit vibes.
Yeah.
Some of the northern, like old Scandinavian cultures as well. So some Finnish stuff taken in there. Much more in terms of furs. Big Water Nation vibe, like Airbender Water Nations. And then you've got the Calavesi, who are, and even the Calavesi are interesting because everyone just thinks birds and feathers. But when you look on the brief, there's actually more going on there. They've got a heavy Iron Age vibe going on, post-Roman angle thing going there as well. And all of those things ticks so many of my boxes. So I think even within that, a lot of the forgotten the word for it, the archetypes. A lot of the archetypes are actually kind of like subdivisions of those types of things. Like you got the Stormcrow. Stormcrow is a priest, effectively, is the closest analog. But they are and they aren't. So a lot of them are subdivisions or more specific versions of something else.
I think what's interesting about it is they could very easily have made 3 distinct nations. But I think they consciously made us the decision to make a nation that was a more cosmopolitan nation that combines those 3 briefs. And when I did the history episode and sort of dug a little bit into the Wintermark history to piece that together, one of the interesting sort of through lines that I think they teased out from that early history was this idea of a shared pursuit of heroism, and how that actually then makes a nice kind of unifying bow with those 3 nations, and how they kind of actually then fit together with a sort of a unified identity, and why these 3 peoples would choose to sort of unite and these kind of things. And it makes the Wintermark brief, especially when you couple it with the shared history with Varushka, very rich indeed.
Yeah, massively. It's fascinating, especially where it's got this heroic origin story as well. The idea of the 3 different tribes, or the 2 different tribes coming together, joining, forming. It's the classic episode. You must join to defeat the bigger evil. It's cultural Avengers, basically.
If you're curious, by the way, about which episode is the history episode that Ian's talking about, it's number 43. I just had to look that up. So number 43, that's the one. Highly recommend it. It's very, very good. Sorry, chaps.
Thank you. But no, it was super interesting doing that, because it really kind of gave more of an insight into Wintermark. And I think sometimes from an outside point, you can look at Wintermark and say they're the biggest nation, and they've got all of this kind of focus, but it's actually very well put together, and it's very richly intertwined, as I say, with other nations as well. Varushka being the obvious one, because of course the Steiner and the Vard and how they link together, and the Ushka and all, and that is actually a very core part, in a way, of the tale of the Northern peoples, which is richly told within Wintermark.
Yeah, and it's really cool, and this is actually a compliment to PD on the design element as well, and that giving the nations these shared histories, in that it's not like every nation is this siloed entity.
Yeah,
every nation has a crossover with another nation at some point in its territory, like the Marches and Dawn and Highgarden, and how it all they bleed together. So there is these areas of overlap, and we still see that in play. Like even now, Wintermark, one of the big things we might get onto as well is now we have a shared history with the orcs very much as well. Well, we kind of did anyway, because awkward. But now
was that awkward?
You know what? I only realised as I was saying it. But yeah,
right, stop recording. We're ending this farce right now. I'm not having this podcast turn into that. Jesus Christ!
Damn it! I'm not even the pun maker in my group either. I'm
Honestly, I'm
I'm the one who
embarrassed.
I couldn't
found it.
I'm
resist.
so
I was thinking
sorry,
of-
listeners. I'm so let's try and keep on, guys. Just try and keep on track. I don't want any of that. I was about to say any awkward moments again and realize what I was walking into. It's horrendous.
Yeah.
So yes, the orcs have had a checkered past with the Wintermark due to
Yeah.
issues of slavery, right, and other things.
Yeah, but then it goes beyond that, because then there was the whole Scarsind motion, in that we literally gave them a homeland, which is a huge thing. That was and that was fascinating for me as someone who's really close to that plot when that happened, which is in itself, I think that's the only piece of significant plot I've ever been involved in. But that was incredible, and that was genuinely moving seeing that happen. So these cross nation weaves are still happening even now and coming about as a result of player action. But yeah, you're right in terms of that there's a natural both stylistic overlap with some of the other nations, like Varushka being one of the most notable examples, and there's an aesthetic crossover as well. I mean, it's not uncommon for someone to mistake a Varushkan from a Steiner. And that happens. I mean, within the costume brief for Wintermark, it expressly says no hero pants, because they're Varushkan thing, and it's and it seems like a really picky thing, but that is one of the things that has to divide, because otherwise they do come up against each other. Likewise, it's not dissimilar, not unusual for Navari to maybe get mistaken as a Calavesi, for example.
I mean, if you are light on your face tattoos, sorry, Dave, you go for it.
Yeah, that's literally what I'm saying. You're saying what I was about to say, so yeah, go on.
Yeah. If you don't do your face tattoos, you can easily get mistaken for a member of Wintermark for sure.
Yeah, they literally, people will check your tattoos. I think the common thing that they do anyway, right? Tattoos, Navarre, right? But I think that is one of the indicators. I think I don't mind that at all, having that crossover between these different nations, because they don't all clash into each other. One thing trying to do these nation episodes, I was talking to the Marchers last time, and it was interesting them talking about their relationship with Dawn, and then also how some of their kit might cross over with other nations and how they make them distinct. I think this is something that happens all around the field, but it suits that we are all still humans within a geographical area, and we kind of bleed into each other, just like normal geography does, right? Like borders are when you get to them, there's only a few very harsh borders in the world where you really get that sense. Mm-hmm. It's never hard, it's usually more gradual, you know.
And then you got the magic of the egregores, who stop you from veering too far, so they keep you tethered to that cultural anchor point for your nation, and then you can veer close to one of the other things, but the second the second it feels like you're veering too far, that's the point when that pull of the egregores will rein you in.
And I think there is an interesting element of play where, when you first turn up to Empire, you're very much generally sort of persuaded to be as on brief and sort of fit the brief. But of course, through the natural evolution of play, your character may choose, or in a sense earn, the ability to explore these kind of other sort of influences. And someone might gift you a piece of kit from another nation, and then are you not going to wear it? Well, you put that bracer on, and it might not be typically of your nation, but it's something that is characterful, and it's expressly tied to you. I mean, I think of my own character's sort of hints towards Urizen, and how that kind of makes for an unusual kind of blend of Navarre and Urizen. And
I've just realised I was about to fire into this conversation, but we are getting off the point. We need to stick to Wintermark, guys. So we're going to come back and we're going to talk about how do you feel like are some of the distinctive characteristics? Well, we're just going through the three different potential nations within one nation, but how would you say? What's distinctive about the culture of Wintermark, in your opinion?
Yeah, so the big one, which is in the brief, and it's big thing, is this idea of heroism. Heroism is one of the key things for Wintermark, but it's not always physical heroism. It's not just going out into a battle, being big badass fighter. We respect heroes who are cunning. We respect heroes who are wise, who maybe extol the virtues in some way, or maybe even just not the virtues. It doesn't have to be a virtuous act to be a heroic act. And I think that is a key thing as well. People can find their own paths to heroism. And it's surprising because heroism is so fundamental to Wintermark. The section on it in the wiki is actually really brief, and I like that because I've had conversations, both IC and OC, about what heroism means. I have had someone saying, like, I don't care, I will throw my life away if there's even a fraction of a chance of doing this thing. And I look at that and go, really? Because that's not necessarily heroism to me. And that's one of the things that it does call out in the wiki, in that there has to be a chance of success for a thing to be heroic. If
You're not a fanatic, right?
Exactly. We're not lunatics. We're not fanatics. We're not berserkers.
Dawn. Oh, sorry, I got that out. Good.
That's fascinating. Yes. So our shiny friends over on the other half of the field in Dawn.
Dawn. Oh, right. Okay.
Dawn. Yes.
Right.
Their concept of glory. It would be very easy to confuse one for the other, but that's there is a slightly blurry line, and something can be heroic and glorious. It can be both, but it can be one or the other as well.
I think those grey lines are what makes it very interesting, though, because and the virtues can fall into this too. Those elements of when you butt up against the edges of heroism, of glory, of a virtue, and sort of start testing the boundaries. And of course, that makes play, because then it gives you an opportunity to sort of explore those edges with other people and have those kind of conversations. And I think they're very intelligently written to be purposefully vague at the edges. I mean, there's a kind of a core understanding. We get what the word heroism means. Mm-hmm. But when you really hone down into it, there's a lot more there than you would think and suspect.
Yeah, we were sounding like we're just blurring all the nations into each other, and I hope that's not the impression that we're giving, because I think all of us have a sense of these nations are very distinct, and potentially it's a lack of language to be able to really express how on the field these nations, despite having similar elements, can seem a world apart from each other when they're actually interacting with each other on the field. I feel very strongly that I have an identity of what Navarre is, and I know what it doesn't look like as well, potentially, right? It's interesting. I don't know.
There's a lot combined in that. Sorry, you go for it, Pod.
No, I was going to say, what I found fascinating with that is how, if you took individuals from different nations, like if you took a Navarre and a Wintermarker and you put them together in a group and had them work together to solve the problem, it would probably be fine. They'd probably come to some common thing, and their national identity might not shine that way. If you took a bunch of Wintermarkers and a bunch of Navarre, there's like a direct correlation between the number of people from a certain nation in a certain space or working on an issue and the strength of that national identity coming through, because you bounce off each other, and that national identity feeds into each other. And that I think is a big thing in Wintermark, and that then gets interesting because there's so many of us. Like, there's so many Wintermarkers. Like, someone did a chart recently of the biggest LARPs, and I think if Wintermark was its own LARP, it would be like the 4th biggest LARP in the country or something like that. Which is ridiculous, and there's several reasons for that. But there is then a criticism of Wintermark being insular, and going back to this theme of identities and what people associate with Wintermark. We have been legitimately and unfairly in different ways been accused of being a very insular nation, and I think some of that is down to our size, because we do have this huge size issue. You could spend your entire game being just in Wintermark. I think for my first year or so, I barely left the Wintermark camp of the game, because
it's interesting. I've been thinking now, I don't think I've had that many interactions with Wintermarkers outside of the nation, like outside of their area camping. I've interacted with them on the battlefield, both as a monster and human. We've been there for a few drinks, but yeah, that is interesting. This isn't like to lay blame on anyone, right? It's like I completely see the appeal because there's so much in Wintermark to go and explore, right? There's a lot to go and see and do and meet people and do all sorts just within the nation.
Yeah.
To be fair, even geographically, walking across the Wintermark area of the
Massively.
field is a trek sometimes, right? Just if you're going through the IC section of Wintermark, it's pretty big.
Yeah, it's a physical barrier, right? Especially when the weather sets in and there's like a lot of mud on all the areas, right? Like we don't cross that when it gets really bad often, unless we're really pissed, and then we might give it a go.
It's also not a through route to anywhere. Certainly with the current plan as it is. It used to be on a couple of previous plans where you'd have to go through Wintermark to get to the Sentinel Gate. Now, we're in a different field, so that's not the case anymore. So we're not en route to anywhere else. So if you go into Wintermark is your destination, or the OC field. But it is interesting that there isn't that amount of overlap. Especially, you guys are camped right next to us. The Navarre and Wintermark were neighbours.
I think there is it is a fair thing to say. I mean, Navarre's not a small nation either, and
very much
quite possibly. I think it is also fair to say that you could indeed play fairly insularly within Navarre as well, and that is something that a nation of a certain size maybe affords you the opportunity to do.
And do you know what? And even thinking about it, I'm like, I wouldn't be. This sounds really bad, but I wouldn't be adverse to just a Navarre event, right? Like, I love interacting with the other nations and all the stuff that goes along with it, but I'm also incredibly happy to make new bonds within my nation, get to know people, enjoy some of that cultural similarity that Navarre have. It's really nice. So yeah, honestly, I can see the appeal, but yeah.
There was a player event I did. I want to say last year. Pretend last year didn't happen. Then at the end of 2019,
last year,
there was a player event, and it was run at the Eversley site, and it was brilliant, and it got named Top of the Scops. And the idea was it was a hall in Wintermark had thrown open their doors, and they were inviting Scops from across the Empire to come and host, and it was great because it was like a celebration. It was only a small event.
So a Scop is a singer, right, or a performer?
A Scop is not necessarily a singer. So a Scop is a storyteller, a lawmaster, a performer, poet, storyteller. They're a bit of everything. They're effectively the keepers of the nation's history. And
so there's an oral tradition, isn't there?
Massive oral tradition, dude. Yes. Very cool.
Yeah.
Which is what I use as my excuse for forgetting people's names, because we don't write anything down, so that one helps. But yeah, very, very much an oral tradition, inspired by the whole Beowulf. We have, along with this idea of heroism, we also have the concept of naming. So every hero has a name, and every name has a story. And traditionally, it's the role of the Scops to witness the heroic deeds of other Wintermarkers and give them their naming. And the naming is traditionally done, it's a public thing. It's done around the campfire. It's done in front of your hallmates, in front of the nation, maybe not in front of the nation these days because moods drag on for ages, but it used to be. But it should always be a semi-public spectacle where the story is told of a deed or a pattern of behavior that exemplifies this person, and then they're given their name. And earning your name in Wintermark is a huge, huge deal.
I mean,
it's super cool. Right?
Fuck me. I'm not even in Wintermark, and that gets my blood fucking pumping. Just the idea of that. You earn your name through some heroic shit, and then someone names you in front of your peers. Like, Jesus, that's the fucking dream, isn't it?
It's really, really cool. I actually got my name. Was it the last event? Maybe the event before the final event. And that was, I earned my name there. Now, bear in mind, I've been playing Empire for 5-6 years, I think it is. This is character number 3. I've been Tarek for nearly 3 years in play, 3 years game time, and I just earned my name at the end of that time. And it felt great. That said, there's other people who can earn their name much quicker, and different different scops, different halls will have slightly different conventions for how a name is applied. Sometimes it might be because of a single deed. If there's one really notable deed, then that might earn someone a name.
Yeah.
Within my hall, within National Hall, we tend to base it more on a pattern of behavior, like more who someone is rather than a thing that someone has done. It does mean that we run the risk of people dying before they get their names, which has happened. But we're really picky about it. Some possibly too picky, but we work with that. That's an icy thing that we work with.
I would say that's if you're going to go one way or the other, that's the way to go. Like you got to make it like if it's too easy to get, it becomes meaningless. It's like death in LARP, right? If you don't care and every battle you go out and you just die, then come back as a new character and die, then come back as a new character, it doesn't mean anything. If you are really emotionally invested into a character, that doesn't have to be for a long time, but if you are, death carries weight, and that's what's important about it. So getting your name through, like, especially even being disappointed at not getting your name through a certain act that you maybe as in character felt like you did deserve it for. That's great plot. That's really good. The earning of the thing should be hard in all things in LARP, in my opinion.
And if you don't mind, aspirational thing. Yeah,
if you don't mind me asking, like in terms of play, both IC and OC, how do you is there any kind of OC negotiation of names, or do you as the Scops say, I think you should be named this? I mean, obviously this doesn't apply for the whole nation. We should say this is just within your hall if you're happy to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can touch on it in a few ways. So both IC and OC, I've had experience of slight negotiations, sometimes even between halls. Like I've had someone say to me, "Hey, do you have a name?" Like OC, they're asking, like, "Does Tarek have a name?" And I've had it asked IC and OC, and at the time I was saying no, and they were like, "Okay, really interesting." And someone asked me that OC at one point, and I said no, and I knew the person. I had a feeling they might have been building up to a thing, and all I said to them was like, If you are building up to a thing around that, that's cool. From a just coolness and not stealing game, but accidentally stepping on toes game, speak to these people. Just have a word, because it was kind of like intimated that other members of my hall might have been talking about it or something like that. So, it really doesn't matter who you get your name from. It affects you depending on who's recognized, who's called you out.
Sorry, I just want to touch on that. I think that's a really good way to approach maybe interacting with a character about a certain piece of plot that you're not sure about. Talk to the in our case, in Navarre Striding or whatever group they have, who are their friends. That's a really nice, like an obvious and good approach to it, but definitely worth repeating, right?
Yeah, and you don't have to either. You do not have to ask permission to name someone, either OC or IC. Like you could just and bear in mind, names don't necessarily always have to be a nice thing either. So they're notable deeds. They're not always heroic. They can be a bad thing. I've not seen that happen in my life, but that's what I'm given to understand.
Like
anyway.
Talus the Untrustworthy or something. Like, for example,
that would
the not to be trusted.
Generally speaking, it should be a heroic deal. It's a heroic ideal to earn a name, and and even in terms of what that name is. So I've been engaged again in IC and OC discussion with people because, IC, I've maybe consulted other Scops in my hall, or I've witnessed deeds of someone else and I want to speak to other people from their hall. Like if I've had this idea of like, I've witnessed some great behavior from this other person in another hall, I want to speak to members of their hall to understand a little bit more about the person, either to be inspired by the name or to literally get some feedback and bounce ideas off, anything like that, to really make sure the name does match.
Yeah.
Disclaimer, this is how I operate. Different Scops operate differently.
I think it's right to give it on both sides the respect that it deserves. You don't just point at someone and say, I name that person so and so. There's an idea that you would have some some insight into them and their history, and you would take the time to explore that with them and maybe their peers.
And it's interesting because you do get cases, and this is an icy contentious topic, where people can end up with multiple names. They can be the recipient of multiple namings. I see some people agree with that, some people don't. And again, this is great because it builds on plot. So the discussions and the arguments around that are world building in and of themselves. There's also an all too common occurrence of people, and this is where we go wrong sometimes, leaving it too long to get their names. And then the name becomes, it's like, oh, yes, I named this person, Orc Slayer.
Yeah.
Shame they're dead. And so you do get post-mortem namings, which is always a bit tragic because we have this tree of names in the center of the Wintermark camp, and it's meant to be a celebration of these heroes and their names. Too many of them are dead. Too many of the times it gets mistaken as a tree of remembrance. Like, no. You don't have to be dead to be on the tree. You should be aspiring to be witnessed.
Could you describe what the tree looks like and how you interact with it?
Yeah, so the tree is it's like a geometric structure. So it's not a physical tree. We haven't quite got that good. But it's a central wooden pole with these roughly white pole with these really cool like designs, like Native American style inspired designs coming down it. Various metal branches coming off it, and then strings with leather leaves. Oh, sorry, feathers, not leaves. Leather feathers on the end. Each one has a name inscribed on it. And this was the concept of a player known as Shaman, who also, I don't know if you've known Shaman, he also is commonly known as Creepy Naga Dude.
Right.
Played by an amazing player. But yeah, he is just incredible. If you see a creepy Naga guy walking around in a long dark coat, long dark heavy leather coat, big hood on, really creepy face underneath, talking with a very sibilant whisper. He actually camps in the woods near you guys as well.
I think I've bumped into the guy.
I think I've bumped into him.
There's a couple of. I'm thinking of two. One of them might be an orc. I don't know if they wear a mask, but there's a couple of these sort of characters out there, and it's fucking bonkers bumping into these guys. When you're a couple of drinks in and you're in some random bar and you get approached by one of these guys, it's like they drop RP bombs like it's crazy. It's so much fun to interact with, or even just watch them interact with people, right?
Yeah. Shaman for me is like peak because he also makes game for the people.
Yeah.
And he's, if you ask, he's very mysterious. He's terribly mysterious. But he's great because he made the tree of names, both IC and the OC as well. And it's amazing. Just in terms of as a centerpiece, as a focusing point, and even he's a contentious character in game as well because he stabs people. Oh yeah, he will cut people and he will threaten people. But brilliantly, he'll also do Skyne readings. Skyne, that's something I'll come to as well. So he'll do Skyne readings for players, and he makes game. And that for me is just he was a massive inspiration for when I was creating Tarek as a character because like I say, he was character number 3, and I wanted someone who would make game in the same way that he did. Especially in something like Wintermark, where we are so vast. So making sure there's enough game to go around is tricky.
I think that's one of the things you kind of grow into as a LARPer, actually. When you first start, you're kind of more worried about how you're going to find game. Yeah. And then as you kind of play more, your attention turns towards how can I exist within the game and then provide game to other people. And that becomes the more exciting appeal often, is to be someone who can bring the game to other people.
Yeah. I think that's this doesn't also mean, like, when I think of the in my head, what I think of as the best LARPers, which is this is a Dave subjective version of this, right? I think of people who they're not the center of attention for being the center of attention. They're giving other people gain, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a very, like, just to show up there and be very selfish with it's me is not what I'm talking about with sometimes very large characters and very bold characters, sometimes very subtle characters, but that's not what makes them special. It's the game they're generating while doing their character that's so fucking cool, right?
Yeah. And when I came up with Tarek, one of the things I wanted to do with him was, and this is more about the game stuff, is I didn't want to be Commander Shepard. I didn't want to be Hawk. I want it to be the companion character. Because they are great, because they become reflections of the character. They create something, and they create something for the main character to bounce off of, and that's what I wanted to do with it, and bring some of that into Wintermark. I didn't actually succeed on anyway. The character went somewhere wildly different, but seeing people do that in the market and elsewhere as well is really cool.
That actually goes quite interestingly into a question I was going to ask, because I think there is this aspect of how your expectations for what your character is going to be can sometimes wildly differ from the actual realities of playing that character. But did you also have similar experiences with that in terms of the nation and joining the nation? Did you expect the nation to be a certain way, and then did you discover it to be different when you actually first started playing, or was it very much how you expected it to be?
I think the nation was as I expected it to be, partly because the brief was very strong for Wintermark. Yes. It's quite distinct, quite clear. So I don't think the nation threw me. I think how I expected to operate in that nation threw me. Bear in mind, this was it was my first LARP event. I've still not really done any others. I was going to this event for the hitting. It's like I wanted to go into the battles. That's what I wanted to do. Yeah. Wintermark, cool. We almost went Navarre. We were even our original Facebook group for our little group and everything. We were a Navarre group originally. Spoiler: we were the members of Ashenstead before we became Ashenhall. But
Ash is very popular, evidently.
I just realised how I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed now of having Ash in the name of our group.
No way. It happens. This stuff. It makes sense and it works. But
it's so bad. We're so generic. I'll tell you, a lack of imagination.
Everyone's generic. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I know. Have a tragic backstory. Have a really generic name for your striding. If you're in Wintermark, call yourself Olaf or whatever. If you're in Navarre, call yourself Bryn. Wolfric, right? Lean into it.
Yeah. And that's the thing. When I went in there, I was proper like level 1 fighter. I've got my shield, I've got my sword, I've got my chainmail, cool. And I had these great ideas of going into Wintermark with all these other nerds. And and I've got a bit of experience. Like when I say bit, I mean like a tiny bit in terms of a couple of different martial arts things. Or like I vaguely knew how to hold a sword. I had some training in how to hold a sword. So I'm like, I'm going to be great at this. This is a bunch of nerds. I'll rock into this. And then I got into Wintermark. And one of the things I didn't expect was, and bear in mind, I would only really notice this on subsequent events, because my first event was a battle called Ika's Tears, which is notorious in Wintermark.
It doesn't sound like it went well.
I'll cycle back on that in a second. But yeah, and I had these ideas of coming in and being like, sharp, and I come in and this plucky person comes in from no one's like, it's fine, I will lead you. I know what I'm doing here. Unsurprisingly, that did not happen because I didn't know jack all about doing any of this stuff, leading anyone on the battlefield. There were people in that group who knew way more than I do, like literal professionals doing some of this. And yeah, that was humbling. That was a very humbling experience, seeing the level of proficiency in Wintermark, and I've seen that grow and distribute itself a little bit more as well. People have taught other people have come up through the ranks, and that's interesting. And it's taken me years to get into a position of having a relatively junior command position in the battlefield stuff. That was fascinating, coming up through there and seeing how the rest of the nation worked. That I wasn't prepared for.
I think LARP in general, the breadth of players and just the diversity of experience that can make you explore. I mean, the battles were a core thing for us when we first started, but interestingly, the battles have almost become slightly secondary now.
My martial prowess is non-existent, right? Like if at any point in this podcast, like while listening to it, you ever thought to yourself, wow, those guys really know what they're doing on the front line? Not at all. I have a shield, I wave my sword around a bit, and I tend to run away unless I'm going to win this fight. I'm out. Do you know what I mean? Like, a lot of it is standing in lines, trying to look scary, which I can do. That's one thing that I would say I can do is like look like I know what I'm doing.
Mhm.
As soon as they figure out he has no clue, I'm in a world of shit. So yeah, I feel like, but there are people out there that are legit badasses, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
do you remember that one where it was a skirmish against the Vlorn in some woodsy, and then we're fighting, and then there's this one guy who's like 6 foot behind the enemy lines. We're all fighting, right? But he's behind the lines of the enemy, just going, "Come on, charge!" type thing. And he's double wielding weapons and just walking through, and you're like, I couldn't do that. I can't do that, right? Like, I don't have the ability to do that. But when you do bump into people that really know what the fuck they're doing, that martial prowess, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that comes across, like you were saying, sometimes in how each nation fights, you know, and their tactics, right?
But I think, sorry, go for it, dude.
No, you go.
Yeah, I think also there's so many, and this harks back to your thing of different ways to be heroic. There's different ways to be effective.
Yeah.
There's different ways to achieve the goals that you maybe go into, and you can have a big influence on any situation just through a combination of luck, drive, and application of the right sort of tilt of your skills.
How do you feel about, like, we keep touching on this, the idea of like you're in a larger nation and you want to kind of like, you know, enjoy being part of Wintermark. You want to get out there, get involved in some of the larger plots. Like, how would you suggest people go around that if they were new to Wintermark and wanted to get involved?
Find something you care passionately about. That really is one of the best. To use one of the best examples I can find. Quick check. Are you okay with naming players?
Yeah, if you think they would be okay with it, then it's on your head, really. So
Okay.
It's blame Pud.
Great case in point is Eska, a character called Eska, who is played by someone called Meg, and she came into the game around the time of, it was after the Scarce into Motion, and I don't know how much people will remember about all of this. Basically, Scarce in Motion was Wintermark gave up one of their own territories with the idea of then ceding it to the Imperial Orcs to give the Orcs a homeland.
Yeah.
Massive deal. My previous character had been a big part of that. They then died, so I didn't get to play on the game I created as a result of that. But then this person called Eska appeared on the field, and what PD had written some plot around one Wintermark Thane called Dogry Foolsbane, who refused to leave Scarsind. He was like, "No, I'm staying here. I'm not giving up this territory." And it became seriously tense, like nation splitting.
And this was this an NPC or actual player character?
So this was plot. This was plot written by portrayed by an NPC. I think it was another 3 events before they turned up on the field. But this is all background plot. Meg came into the game, but Eska came into the game, and she came with this character of, I'm a member of Dogry's Hall. I've come to Wintermark and I've come to Anvil to speak on his behalf. And she just ran with it. This was a bit of plot that she took. She read up on it and she spoke passionately. I mean, she's an actress as well, which helps because she really sold it. And that was great, to the point where a lot of people thought she was an NPC. You know, they thought she was a plot creation because she took it and just ran with this. There was trials, there was discussions, there was debate, and it was brilliant because it not only created game, it boosted her profile. It was a really, really cool plot line, and then that plot line got resolved eventually after much tears and several executions and lots of death and tears and carnage. And then okay, well, that's resolved. And then Eska was like, slavery. That's a bad thing. So there was the, I'm forgetting the name of it, was the Liberty Pact. So the Liberty Pact was a big deal recently. She was one of the key drivers behind that.
Oh, so she's going to be responsible for World War One. Okay, great job by Esther there. You know, I joke. It's so good. It's fantastic. The Liberty Pact, just to go over it real quick, is a treaty with nations that don't keep slaves and agree not to use slaves, they will trade freely with each other. But if you are part of a slaving nation, then we will put tariffs on you, and everyone agrees to do that. Unfortunately, what this has actually done is created this weird like domino effect of potential alliances and all sorts of crazy shit. So yeah, like millions of people are going to die, but it is really cool that we are fighting slavery at the end of the day. So
I think it's one of those, short-term pain for long-term gains, assuming we're around long enough to get the long-term gains.
yeah, I mean, if we survive it, then everyone's a winner,
Yeah, fine.
We'll stack some bodies and it'll be pretty bad. It's going to get rough. It's going to get rough, but if we all stick together and think about the principle, then we'll be fine. Anyway,
So-
Wintermark.
Yeah, no. Well, I was actually going to ask in terms of because you spoke about Navarre, but were there other nations that you considered other than Wintermark, or were you particularly drawn? I mean, and if so, what were those nations?
Yeah, not at the time. So at the time when we were first joining the game and working out what we wanted to play, so there was myself and a handful of mates, so Oz, Mark of the Humes Variety, and a few others looking at different nations. And honestly, Navarre, because in terms of tropes, I like my wood elves. I like crayon face murder hobos, to use a slur. That's very much my bag. I like people just being nutters and will happily cut you for looking at their tree wrong. So obviously, hashtag not all Navarre, etc.
Yeah.
But it's
there's true though. Like it's not,
yeah.
I'm saying now as a Navarre, that's 100. There are a lot of. They're not everyone, but there are a lot of them in Navarre. So.
And that was cool, and I think partly because I'm a big fan of spears. I'm predominantly a spear fighter in Wintermark now, and spears are a very classic Navarre weapon. So yeah, all of that really appealed to my aesthetic, and it was like, that's cool. But they've got shield walls over there, and I really like shield walls.
It's weird. I love shield. I used to love shield walls, but now I'm like, shield walls. Do you know what I mean? I'm so meh about it. But no, shield walls are fucking cool. Like if you ever watch like Vikings, what was the one? Was it the Last Kingdom in England? It was the first episode of that, right? Whatever that was, they had this great shield wall battle, and it's horrible and it's fun. But yeah, I can totally see the appeal of being not a Viking and fighting in a shield wall. Yeah. I don't know why I brought up a Viking show to describe it. So
no, it's fine, because I think there's one episode in particular on that, and I think it was in the second season. Which has the single best representation of a shield wall battle I have ever seen put to screen, and it was beautiful because it wasn't just people charging, it wasn't people being nutters, it was full on forming the wall, firing in gabs, this tide wall of dead bodies when the lines split. Horrible and carnage, and God, I miss shield walls.
Yeah, one thing I would say, like if you're a Navarre, you'll often fight Wintermark when you're monstering, right, and vice versa. Yeah. It's just the way it is. They're both massive nations. It's how the weighting kind of like works on this stuff. So we fight each other a lot. I wouldn't say this is true for all of Wintermark, but there's a real hardcore is the wrong word because it makes it seem overly violent, which is not what it is. It's just a very professional unit of soldiers, and they work very well together when they're fighting. And when you come across like a very well organized shield wall, it's cool to watch, but you're also like jealous of the unity of the people that you're fighting because they will step in. We sometimes are real dicks about it, and we'll count back and basically try and taunt. And it must be horrible being in that position, by the way. I apologize so much. I feel really bad now that I'm talking about it. But
it's great. No, it's really cool.
The unity of that shield wall looks very cool from the outside. Like it's nice to see the bonds and the different characters, because there's very distinctive characters on that line as well that are all kind of G'ing each other on and working together.
And it's great because these days I'm actually a skirmish captain, so the irony is I fight more like a Navarre these days than you might describe as the typical Wintermark. But so these days I'm fighting as a skirmisher, supporting your shield walls. But brilliant. When you do have the shield walls, one wall on the other, and then skirmishers coming around, that synergy, and this ties back to the 3 people, 1 nations. It's that alloy, the 3 different styles, the 3 different attributes working in concert with each other. And that shield wall fighting, yeah, it's because I'm a fanboy. Bernard Cornwell. I named my first character was named Kadan after a Bernard Cornwell character, because I also have no imagination, and it's also on my email. And yeah, it was being part of that is just incredible. And the group that you mean, they get referred to as the Iron Bastards on the field. And there's
so they are. This isn't imagined. It's like
no.
They're a very real thing, are they?
So for rough concept of Wintermark military setup in terms of Anvil military setup, there's a few distinct military units on the field. There's different smaller ones, but the most obvious one that people will associate with most when they see them from outside the nation is what's currently referred to as the Iron Bastards. They are the ones who you'll see people going, "Oh my god, they look so well drilled. They're so together." And it's like, yeah, because they literally drill together. There's a lot of them who know each other from other game systems, from outside Empire or otherwise. They have actually trained together. The guy who the guys who lead them and train them. It's no accident they know what they're doing. They are trained.
I need to pick up.
They are doing.
I need to pick up my weapons and do something with them in the long dark. Right? Like I'm listening to this and I'm just like, while we're sitting here getting fat on the couch, these guys are out there just like every day training and they're sweating in their garages. Do you know what I mean?
It's like a Rocky montage going on off screen.
For like over a year. They're like they are made of iron now.
But it's great. So you've got those guys who are like a solid trained block. And of course, not everyone's coming in there. So you get a lot of players who come on are part of smaller holes. And bear in mind, because I know I'll get told if I don't describe it properly by Ailton if I don't represent him right. So they're not just one hole. They're a conglomeration of multiple holes. Anyone can go and fight with them. They're effectively the heavy infantry blob of Wintermark. And then separate to that, you've got what's called the Heart of the Mark. Now, the Heart of the Mark was originally established as a way to bring together a bunch of small holes, rather than having, like a dozen or 20 small holes all fighting and dealing with their own thing without any kind of command structure or unity. The Heart of the Mark was formed to have all those different holes come together and fight as one. Under one banner for the purpose of that battle, and then that's it. It's informal / semi-informal thing. So the current captain of the Heart of the Mark, which is a nominated position, that is a character called Helgen. So she's my boss. I'm a captain under her, so I lead the skirmishes under Helgen. And then there's a couple of smaller units, but there's also another notable one, which is the Bloodhands. So the Bloodhand healers are a military formation, effectively, who their job is to get healers onto the field, heal people, get them out again. So within the Bloodhands, you can have healers. So you can have oh god, I'm forgetting my own archetypes now.
Could I just butt in and say this is awesome? Like that's the coolest thing. Like you're like guarding a healer up into the line and back again.
Yeah,
I think I've seen that. I think it's funny you're describing this stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's what that was.
Because I think, Tarek, you're referring to there's an archetype in Wintermark for a type of healer, and it's they're committed to not actually fighting. Am I correct in that? But they heal people on the battlefield, but they don't fight. Am I correct?
Yes, the Grimnir.
That's it. Yeah.
I totally didn't have to just look that up because oh god, I'm
podcast. Stop giving it away. It's okay.
So the Grimnir, and the Grimnir is a fascinating thing. So they're one of the archetypes, and their idea is they make an oath. So you can be a healer and not be a Grimnir.
Yes.
But a Grimnir is someone who has taken an oath to it's not they won't take up arms, but they won't seek battle. They won't seek combat. They won't seek heroism in the fighting. They are there to be healers. If they get attacked, sure, they can defend themselves. Again, different people interpret the oath slightly different ways, but there it is. They won't go and stand in the battle line. They will heal heroes. They will get them up. But it does mean that a lot of them will be quite squishy. So when you've got the Bloodhound healers, who are a combination of healers themselves, some Grimnirs, some non-Grimnir healers, and then some fighters who are there to support them, it's really good because historically we have lost a lot of people, especially in withdrawals, retreats, anything like that. Getting people up, getting them back behind those lines rather than just healing them in front of the lines. And so they work great.
One of the hardest things to do in battle, and it's one of the ways that you'll most likely die as a character, will be the line moves over you and you get stuck and there's no way to get for a healer to get to you, and that your timer times out essentially. Or as you say, just healers aren't able, there's a healer blob, but it's not well protected, it's not near the front line enough. We found when we've got the Sea Wolves, who are a mercenary outfit who we've kind of pay to essentially do the same with our healer blob, and that's had a marked effect on sort of our ability to actually sort of replenish the lines, because that's essentially what you're doing. Often things can turn into a battle of attrition.
Your healers are your engine. Like if that isn't working properly, then you're not going anywhere, right? Like you need to be able to have that fast cycling of like be able to heal people quickly and safely, and then just get as maximum amount of people on the and wanting to fight, right? Like if people are on like 1 or 2 wounds left, they're not going to charge. Right, you need to have everyone kind of at that ready stage where they're like, okay, cool, right? We're all pretty healthy, most of us, right? That's enough to really be confident in this next engagement.
And you've got to give people that confidence afterwards as well. So the most common cause of deaths, as I see from Wintermark battles, and again, this might be partly down to the way we fight, is either it will be as part of withdrawal. So as we're pulling back, people fall in the withdrawal, we're not able to get them back. We've got better at that. There have been near routes, there have been absolute clusterfucks in the past where a lot of people have died. I've died as a result of this on my first character. And it's heart-wrenching. It's hard because once it starts, it becomes a cascade.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we drill most in Wintermark is withdrawing from a battle. So we'll have like pre-battle drills on like the Friday night. It's disengaging, and disengaging safely is so key, especially when you're doing close formation battle formations. It's really important. The other reason a lot of people will fall is when the word comes to step to contact. When you're engaging and you are going, you're pressing on the enemy, whether it's a charge or whether it's just a step in there. But when that order comes, you have to commit to it. And you have to have the confidence to commit to it, knowing full well you're probably going to go down. If you were in that and you have to do it, you are probably going to go down. But you have to have the confidence that the person behind you is going to step over you, not in a callous way, because if they step over you, it pushes the line forward. You are now behind your own lines, and you have to have the confidence not only that you're pushing in and all your mates are pushing in with you as well, so that they will push that line forward, but also that behind you are a bunch of healers who will pick you up, drag you out, heal you up, so you can get back in. If you do not have confidence that there's healers and other people there who are going to follow you in, you won't do it.
I think that when when that line movement happens and there's contact, it's often a battle of wills, right? Like at that moment there, will is like it can last 5, 10 seconds, whatever the hell that moment is, and it's very intense. And that's like people don't just lose units to give ground or to rout or anything like that. It's often in those moments of will, one group against another, and confidence is a huge part of that. That you feel confident in the people next to you. And I think something just with the mere nature of the shield wall and maybe the setup that you have with your healers is something that gives eggs on that.
It's also like the numerics of it can be very, very tight at times. Like one person falls in a particular position that exposes somebody else, and then they go down, and then before you know it, there's a salient within the line. It's been pushed into. It's amazing how quickly it can turn. You can be in a very strong position, and then you can get smashed by a strong group of people on full hit points who come bursting into a weak area and just obliterate.
So it's part of.
Sorry, Pod, go ahead.
I was going to say, so part of the reason for my role is I lead a group of people from the Heart of the Mark, and with skirmishes, the reason I lead this group and especially as part of the Heart of the Mark, is they tend to be, a lot of them are very new players. They're people who are more lightly armed. They don't have a shield. They might not have some heavy armor. This could be their first, second, or third event. They could be relatively new. So they're not fully equipped to stand with the heavy infantry, but they can still be really effective. So I try and take a bunch of those guys, make use of them in the skirmishes, because what they do have is they're much more lighter on their feet, and I can give them that bit of experience. And it's exactly as you say, it's that psychological element, because what I try and do as much as possible, if I can wrap a line or even threaten a line, sometimes with a small band of skirmishers, I've done more by just being there and by being threatening. And that threat, that psychological threat, can be as effective as an actual clash.
Pud, if you want to talk about skirmish fighting, we're Navarre. That's what we do. That's our bread and butter. I mean, that's what we wake up in the morning to do. We love walking around and just being places, looking at another unit, being like, yep, we could charge you. We definitely could. We're not going to, but we're just here because that's just to be the threat. It's really fun being in those units, because we do that a lot in monstering. We do that a lot as Navarre. A lot of moving around in kind of these not massively effective units, but when we do go, that's when the fun happens. It's really
what
good.
I hate? I hate playing against you guys when when you're being Druge or Grendel.
Yeah.
Because that is just perfectly suited to your style of
we
fighting.
really struggle playing Jotun, I think.
Really
which is often
struggle.
what we have, because we can't do the line fighting kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And if it's a case of us lining up against you, we just get ground down often.
We're a scary Grendel. We have a really good time. We're very motivated. Everyone's having an absolute shit head because we're really happy to charge, because we know that okay, we're like a bunch of us are going to die, but we're all G'd up and we're going to have. It makes us a lot more, because this is one thing that's hard with skirmishers. In actual your character, right? Is you don't always want to charge into something, because that's a very dangerous thing being a skirmish fighter, right? Like you can get deaded very quick,
Yeah. Also, if you have too many skirmishers, you lack any anvil for the hammer that you're trying to be.
So this became an interesting thing for Wintermark, where we had an explosion of growth. Like we grew insanely quickly, and it was. It's interesting because it had a shift in the dynamic of our military setup, because, as I mentioned, a lot of the new players aren't necessarily. Some of them will be, but a lot of them aren't going to be equipped for heavy infantry, which meant that the balance of heavy versus light to medium infantry got skewed more in favor of light to medium, and we struggled, and we had a couple of really bad battles, not because people weren't fighting well, but because we weren't used to fighting with that
element.
Balance. So it skewed. Our usual tactics didn't work, because mentally we thought, right, well, we've got this much heavy infantry, this much light infantry, we'll balance our tactic around that.
That's very much. I mean, that's how it played. Honestly, to fight Wintermark, and I'm thinking of two battles that we've been involved in that were very nasty for Wintermark. Like, I think there are two. I think so.
Of last year was.
There was a couple, but I think
2019 was. Yeah,
last year, right? Okay, 2019, last year. Okay, for the rest of the podcast. Like that, it felt unwieldy. Right, like we were fighting something that wasn't quite as coordinated as it should be, just because of its scale, almost. Right, like I think that was something that was quite telling. I have heard though on the grapevine that Wintermark are going to be taking their armies a lot more seriously going forward from those defeats. I think
One thing I will say with Wintermark is we're good about learning. So we've learned from previous mistakes. We learned from previous errors. It was. So I mentioned really early on around that my very first event, I turned up as level 1 Steiner. I had my Saxon tunic. I had my shield. Actually, I'd forgotten my shield, so I had to buy another one at the event because I wasn't not having a shield. And the very first battle, or the battle of the very first event I was there for, was the Battle of Icker's Tears, which became notorious in Wintermark, because Wintermark was annihilated, because that was the first battle that saw the appearance of the War Rhino. And for a long time in Wintermark, there was the rallying cry of "fuck the war rhino."
Yeah,
Because-
it's War Rhino's like Oprah Winfrey handing out like mortal wound cards, right? Like you get
You
a
get
mortal
impaled,
wound, and you get it, and you get it, and you get it. And they're just
Yeah.
like the whole lines of people can just get decimated in
Yeah.
short succession.
And it was-
Fantastic.
And Brown, I'm going to be. This, what I'm describing, a lot of this is hearsay because, full disclosure, it was my first event. On the Friday night, I maybe didn't give all the homebrew the respect it deserved. I
We've all
missed
been there.
my
Mhm.
first battle. I was there for the battles, and I missed my first battle because I was horrifically hungover, probably still drunk, crawling and lying in front of my tent at the time. Meanwhile, brand new Shiny Nation was being slaughtered on a field.
Are
and yeah,
you are you now overly strict with yourself because of that one incident?
I have never been so drunk before or since, and certainly not at Empire. I drink, I 1 for 1 with booze and water these days.
Oh, you're so
Yeah.
well behaved.
You
No,
want to?
well, there's a couple of reasons. I've learned my mistakes, partly because I never want to go through that again, ever. But also because I spend so much time singing or shouting, I
Yeah.
lose my voice if I don't. I have to, otherwise I absolutely will lose my
A
voice.
lot of singers won't even drink alcohol, right, when they're singing because of the effect it
Yeah.
can have on their voice.
Which, I mean, I'm not going to do that because I still really like having a drink. And
We should actually touch on the fact that obviously you perform and sing. The process of being a scop and a bard in Wintermark and coming up with the songs. Can you give any insights maybe to anybody who's thinking of entering the game into the nation in that kind of way, and how to maybe go around piecing together a story or a narrative? Or
yeah, I mean, in terms of the stylistic type things, one thing I will say here is if there's anyone who then goes and looks me up or looks at my music or stuff, I don't think I'm a great representation of Wintermark musical styles. I am in some of them, so some of my songs I'm more happy than others, but I struggle to write to a particular style. I'm not that proficient a musician. There's some people who are much better representations of Wintermark musical style. So I'm just going to throw that one out right now in case anyone goes, yeah, we'll play like Tarek. He's great. It's like, no, don't copy that because it's not always great.
I think there's something to be said for singing in your own voice as well, right? And pursuing your own voice.
Exactly. Wintermark praises his individuality. That's a big thing. Be yourself. If you are proficient enough that you can come up with your own musical style, you can play by yourself, you can, you're an instrumentalist, you can do all that stuff, amazing. If you can just tell a story and tell it well, because stories are a big part. I mentioned about every hero has a name, every name has a story. Storytelling is probably one of the least represented art forms I see on the field. Music, we see loads of it. The storytelling, and specifically my advice, if you're writing a song or you write a poem or you're writing a story, keep it brief, keep it short. The longer it goes on, the more you're going to lose your audience. If it's a song, 3 verses, 3 verses in the chorus. If you're telling a story, if you can keep it to 5 minutes, great. If you get really confident and as you get more experience, cool, extend it out there. But a short, high quality story is a work of art. I can't do this. Give me a script, give me a story to read out. I will go to town on it and I will love it. But people who can weave a tale and weave a narrative, there's a few people who are superb at that. Our Thane is one. So Thane Jag, he is brilliant at doing it. Other one, he used to be our Egregore, and now you've got him. So Al, before he was
Al's
called
amazing.
Dawn just stole ours. Don't look at us like that. You know what I mean? It happens to everybody.
But he's an example of a superb storyteller as well, because he also keeps it brief. So that would be one of the best pieces of advice I would give anyone.
Al's like my high watermark for a storyteller at Empire. Basically,
He's phenomenal.
There's the nuance in what he's doing. You can just go and watch Al and just enjoy the story. But when you're trying to learn about how to tell stories, you're just like, that's smart. Oh, that's really smart. Oh, I like that, and it's yeah. There's a real art form to it, and I definitely aspire to tell stories. Actually, one thing we did actually get a story when we went to Wintermark. It was around there was a fire on a slightly raised area. Man,
Yeah.
this is funny. Is that true? Is there a raised area in the camp with a fire on it?
We have a fire pit. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we've
I
got,
picture it as
fire pit.
raised in my head, like
it's basically just, it's like imagine something about the height of maybe a coffee table.
yeah.
It's oval. I'm going to say it's about
Yeah.
7 foot long.
That sounds
Okay,
about right.
fine. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
brain hasn't completely taken over the narrative up there yet. So
You'll know it when it's not lit and you walk into it in the pitch darkness. That's where you'll know.
yeah, I walked into the Farushkan fire, or like I think it was a wood pile. I don't know why I'm bringing up that story. It was actually very embarrassing at the time. I probably shouldn't mention it. But we got a story in Wintermark. Just I can't. He must have been. He was wearing the kind of Stone Crow gear, so I assume it was. But he was asked to tell a story, and it's always good when if someone asks someone to tell a story, you're like, all right, hold on, boys. We're just gonna stay here for a couple of minutes. We're gonna hear the man out and all women out, and then we're gonna get head on.
And it's a key thing there. It's like getting people's attention is easy. Holding their attention is much harder. And that's where the combination of that brevity and having a performance style, you don't have to shout, but be clear, enunciating. People shouldn't have to strain to hear, but at the same time, they shouldn't be leaning back. You can emote without shouting. I say this to role players around the world.
One of the great joys about your stuff, if you'll forgive me for fanboying a little bit.
Let it out, Ian. Come on, you've been so well behaved, Ian. You've been so well behaved.
We were inside one of the taverns of Wintermark, I forget which one, and you kind of came in and just blew us all away with just some remarkable singing, but a fantastic voice, really good playing of the instrument. But the core part of it was the story in the song. And the way it actually spoke to the brief of the nation very clearly. You got a very clear sense of what it was, and you use the word virtue, but I mean in terms of the virtues of the nation, what the actual aspects of the nation that you as an outsider would want to aspire to were. Rise Up's a great song, for example.
What's funny with that is there's a couple of things funny there. First off, I think I know exactly the performers and exactly the tent that you're talking about, because that was because I remember listening to your podcast, and I think it was the first batch of it, because I think you spent like 3 of your first 3 episodes just talking about that one event, that first event, which was Mud Apocalypse. And because I remember I was listening to the podcast and I was like, I know that event. I remember the battle. I remember the swamps, because it was just, the mud was horrific.
Crazy. Event, dude.
And what was meant to be happening there was meant to be a Wintermark festival of arts. That's what we intended to do. British weather had different ideas, so it ended up as just cramming into the Artisan's Arms, which is the biggest tavern in Wintermark. But it was just cramming in there, doing a bunch of ad hoc performances, basically. And that's actually interesting. So there's again, I'm not going to use this to talk about my own stuff, but so the first 2 songs I wrote, one was Sing for the Mark, and one was Rise Up. Now, Sing for the Mark I thought was interesting because that is the only very blatantly, explicitly Wintermark song that I wanted to do. And my entire intent there was I wanted something that people could shout along with. That was like very blatant. It's like, cool, I'm going to try and be a performer. I want something to shout with. Cool, I'll try and go with that. I had also been listening to a lot of Hamilton at the time. So it probably won't surprise a lot of people to know that I don't really rap. I'm not a rapper. And yet then I decided to explore the idea of, folk rapping, which I didn't know was a thing, but apparently it is. So I started playing with that, and honestly, it's weird because as a bard, as a scop, I think I made my name and I made my reputation off that song. because it just had a clear focus. There was a thing I really wanted to do, invested a shit ton into that. The beauty
People
is,
loved it, dude, and it really it makes you feel like it's. I didn't say we're in Wintermark. It was a very much we were somewhere else. It like we were. And not in an unwelcoming way, but it was just a wonderful cultural experience to be surrounded by people, and the rallying cry behind. Like I think we kind of half joined in singing, but it's all about how fucking great Wintermark are, which is it's weird for another nation, right? It's great.
That's entirely what it's there for. The entire concept of the song, and this isn't accidental. So the concept of the song was meant to be, it's like, hey there, people, welcome to our fire, and it's meant to be, come in from the cold. Let me introduce you to my nation. Let me tell you about my nation. Is the entire concept of the song, which I really, really wanted to do. It was a very conscious decision that I wanted to do that, because cycling back to a conversation we had, possibly even just before we started the podcast, Wintermark hasn't always had the best reputation amongst other nations, and sometimes other players, sometimes justifiably so as well. And
I want to hold on. I want to just clear our names by saying that it may be a victim of like Wintermark's success is sometimes they have a bit of a bad rep for just for that. Like I don't even, I look at me sweating now. Do you know what I mean? Please Wintermark, don't come and get me.
No, and it's genuinely fine, because there have been times where it's understandable. I think a lot of Wintermark players, especially some of the old hand, since we even call myself an old hand because there were people around before me. We have had problems both in terms of our size, in terms of our representation. I don't think I'm entirely out of realm by saying that there's been a few characters historically in Wintermark who I don't believe play the game anymore who've rubbed people up the wrong way as well. There are some people who's, when I say that I mean players, there have also been some characters who very deliberately rub people up the wrong way because that's their character, that's what they do. So there are some antagonistic elements to Wintermark. And yes, the sheer size of us. I know that we've been both praisingly and disparagingly referred to as the Noob Nation, the level 1 Noob Nation, because I got told someone gave, it was in a conversation. I said I was Navarre, and someone said Noob Nation. I can't remember when it happened, but I remember it doesn't feel nice. That's for damn sure being called part of a Noob Nation. It's gross. Like if you ever say that about another nation, like wash your mouth out. It's horrible. It's like it's a really nasty prejudgment on anyone as an RPer, as a role player. It's like I don't think that's fair at all. I remember like at one event. I'll tell you an anecdote, right? Just to kind of get context for what I'm actually talking about, right? So I'm going to talk about like basically Wintermark becoming like a boogeyman because of their reputation, right? So when you're fighting, when you're going to, as your nation, to fight monstering, the entire opposition are wearing masks. I had a couple of battles where some guy kept whacking me in the head, and like rudely so. This isn't like, oh, I hit you in the head because it's the only thing I had an option to hit or whatever. It was quite rude, and like I got pretty pissed off of it. Someone said, oh, that's that Wintermarker again. And I think back at it now, where the assumption was just so easy to fit and being like, of course it was a Wintermarker. And that's kind of bullshit prejudice, right? Like you're like, I have no idea where that guy was from, what nation he was from, or whether he represents his nation in any way, shape, or form. But I think that's an easy trap to fall into at a large fest like this, Yeah, and it's interesting. I think partly because, to use the Noob Nation analogy, at a certain point a couple of years ago, we very much earned that. That appellation. We became a Noob Nation because a huge proportion of the influx of new players came in via Wintermark, because of the popularity of certain people like Humes and what have you, and just it's simple. The brief is very simple. The basic kit can be very simple as well. People see Wintermark and they can just see some of the bits. Like you see a Steiner, you see a Wintermark Steiner, without reading the brief, you get an idea of what the culture is. It's very easy. It's very accessible, and I don't know if it's been a conscious thing, but we've kind of come to embrace that. I mean, I don't regard it as being a bad thing now. It's like, cool, we got a bunch of people into the game. We will quite happily if we get a massive wave of players and they all come into Nation, we'd say, don't just choose Wintermark, explore other nations. But if you come into Wintermark, cool, we'll come into Wintermark, we'll try and give you a great experience. If you die and you respawn as another nation, great. All power to you. Hope you enjoyed your time here. We'll see you in another life. And that's fine. I am totally okay with that. My role, my Battlefield roles, I take people who are green and new to the nation, and I try and give them a good experience on the battlefield and bring as many of them back alive as possible. So I
couldn't agree more. And ultimately, surely you want your nation to be an inviting place that attracts more people, and more people means
New
more
people
potential
too, right?
characters, more game, more everything, right? Every person is another opportunity to have, an excellent time and to help someone. And there's nothing more enjoyable or rewarding in LARP than helping someone else, achieve good RP or just being part of their story in any way. That's the rewarding stuff, right?
It's one thing I've been curious about because we came in as part of that wave. I can't remember how long after. I think we went to E1, whatever. We missed a couple of events after it was released, right? But we were definitely part of that big wave of new players. And it must have been interesting. And it's something that I'm curious about when I talk to some more experienced players or more long in the tooth players is that cultural shift that might have happened. And that must have been quite jarring for some people in their nation, right? Like they must have felt like this is my place in this nation and this is how it goes. And there's a massive influx of all these new people. It must have been quite jarring. I feel like now I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more kind of unity in the nations anyway. Not that there was ever a rift, but I think like that cultural identity kind of gets spread around, right? Like, and that might be my version of Navarre might be very similar to many other people of why I like the nation and the different things that triggered me into it. In fact, I'm curious. So for example, I would say fighting, singing, being threatened with a knife outside when you're leaving to go and get a thing, you get a cookie or a knife fight, right? That's a very Navarre thing that you get used to. Songs and stories, right? There's a few of these, right, Ian, that are kind of like these are the things that indoctrinate you into the nation. Like, what would you say are the kind of things that players in Wintermark might bump into that will kind of like draw them into this idea of being part of a nation?
Yeah, I mean, I can't not reference the militaristic aspect of it, because although, yes, we do celebrate non-combat heroism as well, it is still a huge part of the Wintermark game. You do not have to be a fighter to be part of Wintermark at all, and you can be any type of fighter. You can be a mage. I'm just throwing these disclaimers out there. I don't want to discourage people thinking, oh, well, I don't fight. But we do large-scale battle training in the middle of our square on the Friday night. When Wintermark is mustering in the morning, ready to go to battle, holy shit, that's a sight. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. And it's really cool. Even now, it still gives me tingles when we do that. That's one element of it. Another big thing for us is campfires, being around the fire. And where I mentioned earlier on that I didn't leave the Wintermark camp for like my first year or 2 years, because everything I wanted was around that fire with my friends, my hall, sat around the fire, chilling out. And this was before I was a Scop as well, so I was a fighter from my previous 2 characters. So I wasn't even performing. Just that social element and that camaraderie around, whether it's the small fire, whether it's one of the big fires, like the big Wintermark fire pit. That tradition of hospitality is also a key thing, and it's in the wiki as well. So there's a tradition. Don't abuse it. They're still players rather than people's halls, so don't go in there expecting free booze from every hall. But the concept of hospitality is a big thing. The moot is an interesting, so our equivalent of your standings. The moot is an interesting experience. It's like everything, meetings happen, they're big, and that Friday time in moot, when that happens and you get all the nation together for the first time, we have a position called the steward. crap again. I'm forgetting even my Wintermark.
I'm afraid you have to leave Wintermark now, Pud. I'm
It's
afraid
really
you
bad. This is really
lacked one
embarrassing.
piece of information. So
Basically, there is a Wintermark position who's effectively the chairperson of the big meetings, including the Moose. So they keep things moving along. They stop just random people rambling. They stop it dragging on for hours, because that has happened. Historically, that used to happen. But when you've got several hundred people rather, gathered around in this big circle, all cheering, and one of the things we do as well is a tradition started by someone in the hall. It was like, who here is Steiner? Hooray! Who here is Suak? Hey. Who's Calavesi? Hey. Who's Wintermark? And that roar. And again, every nation does it. But it's one of the strengths when you do have that many people. One of the things you can do is that roar when it comes up is wonderful.
quick question.
Yep.
Can Steiners and Suak and all that stuff, can they, I mean, the different, like these archetypes, can they group together in one house or
Yes.
hall?
Hall. So the idea is it's not each of the different Wintermark nations. So the Suak originally were from Summer Suak. The Steiner predominantly from Harnmark. The Calavesi are from Calavesa. So traditionally from these regions, but you choose your tradition when you come of age. So you're not born into a tradition. These three nations are called traditions. So the Steiner, Suak, Calavesi are traditions. And it's a conscious decision when you come of age, either as a player or whatever. And you will have halls who are maybe predominantly of one of these traditions, or they could be a complete mingling of all of them. There's no geographical boundary as to where each of these different traditions can come from. And yes, it's exceptionally rare for any hall to be just one tradition.
Interesting. I didn't know that. That's cool. Thanks for clearing that up.
You will get some who will be very themed towards one hall. Like there's a couple of halls, or some who people will think, like to use Dunhalf for an example, who are the huge Wintermark hall who all dress in red up at the top of the field. People think they're a Steiner hall. There's non-Steiner in their hall as well, but they're quite heavily based on Steiner. There's one of the group, I think the Acelings, who I think are all Steiner. And they've got a very strong unified theme, but most halls will have multiple nations represented.
Awesome.
And multiple traditions.
I'm just going to go and pee. I'm listening. Just keep talking, basically. I'm sure you both will be fine.
Yeah, I guess I was going to put you in the role of being part of the tourist bureau for Wintermark. If I was someone from another nation and I wanted to pick up the pod brochure of where and what I should do, because speaking for myself, and I think going to Wintermark is partly for the scale of it, but also just for the sights and sounds is something that you should try and do if you attend Empire. But if you were to try and, as I say, put together a little tourist brochure of Wintermark, what do you think you would say to someone from another nation that they should go and do and see and explore?
Yeah, if you were coming to Wintermark, as in Wintermark as the Wintermark camp in Anvil,
yes,
then
that's what I meant.
Yeah, I would say go for a drink. So we have also there's lots of different bars and stuff, but get a beer in the Artisan's Arms. Get a go for tea at Lumi's. So Lumi's tea shop, excellent. Lumi's has literally saved my voice because she does a Scops toddy, which is like lemongrass and tea and ginger and rum. That has saved my voice on it.
What's the name of the place again?
Lumi's tea shop.
Well, we haven't been there. We're definitely going now.
Definitely, yeah. Tea at Lumi's, drink in the Artisan's Arms, be around the fire. So Wintermark is a place that comes alive at night. When the sun starts going down, when the fires get lit, especially when that central fire pit gets lit, be there. Attend a moot, just to hear the business get talked about. You get a rough idea of the feel of the nation there. Either go to battle or see us go to battle, which is really cool. But yeah, go to halls. And that's a key thing. If you really want a good sense of the nation, go around halls, visit people's campfires, ask his stories to be told.
Yeah, it's something that we haven't really done. I think we've kind of approached it the wrong way because there are some big fuck off halls, right? There are like some things, and we've gone to the mistake of going, "Are you a bar?" Right, and that is, and we should stop asking in Wintermark if they're a bar because it's a terrible opener, right? Like it's a bad first cold move into a thing. Like we've had a few things, and this isn't on the same scale. I would say this is something kind of like. Other nations do it where there's kind of like fire hopping, right? Where you might go around and like say hello to people and like approach. And there's always a really lovely back and forth of it. Hello. I make a wisecrack. Someone else makes a wisecrack. They laugh. Oh, can we join you? Yeah, I think we've got some extra seats. And then we have a little shindig with some new people, right? Wintermark, it seems like more like a kind of like, what's that thing, tailgating or whatever, right? Like in the States where they have the pickup trucks. There's just like, it's big fires, lots of people, it's a big vibe. And we've never really got into any of it. We're not cool enough, Ian. We haven't really got into any of those fires.
I've done a bit of walking around Wintermark. It's sort of late at night. But like one of the great things is, and to hit on what you were saying, and Andrew, is like the fact that you can kind of walk around and you'll see all of these silhouettes moving around all these different points of light, which are these fires all around Wintermark. And as you're walking around, you're kind of it's almost like it kind of struck me as like being a bit like those silhouette puppet show sort of things from the outside when you're looking in. It's actually quite spectacular because of the sheer number of fires and people and groups having those little discussions, and each one of those is a node where you can go and engage in some story. And I came back from a bad defeat at the Hand of the Seaboars after a poker game, and I happened to sort of stroll through Wintermark, and actually there was like an open chair near one of the sort of halls there. I can't remember who they were, but they were so awesome because they just gave me a little, like, I just sat with them for a bit by the fire because it was super cold, and I just had an opportunity to warm my hands, and I was just listening to the general business of the hall. But it was that kind of really nice kind of people watching's the wrong term, but you know what I mean, a feeling of community and a feeling of being around
being
someone
the guest, right?
Yeah, it was cool.
And you're really such a party animal. This is bullshit. Like at OC, I'm like, that's I do. IC, for some reason, I'm the guy that tucked up in bed. Oh, the rusty compass are being very loud tonight, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? I'll tuck myself in with my hot water bottle, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. I need to party way harder next time.
Tarek is not a good representation of Pud, and this is the key thing as well. Because I'm the same. And whereas I'm saying here is like, oh yeah, just go around people's fires, say hi, introduce yourself. I'm terrible. I get nervous. I
climb up a lot.
I cannot cold introduce myself. I hate it. I get very intimidated by it. I am not confident in introducing and insinuating myself into a group like that.
That's fascinating, but that's absolutely fascinating. Like, if anybody knows me, I will talk to. I'm the person that will make a joke to someone standing in the queue at Tesco. I'll talk to everybody. It's 100% what I'm known for. Is just literally having no difficulty whatsoever talking to a group of people or whatever at a distance. And I find that very interesting because I would find the idea of singing or even telling a story sometimes, I find that incredibly difficult despite having the shield of the song or the story sometimes, right? That I find that far more nerve-wracking. I find it fascinating you as a person would have a lack of confidence in approaching a group.
And that's not unusual among a lot of performers. Part of the reason we become performers is because that's, it's easy to do it when you've got a song or a script or something to do when you just got to go up there and be yourself. Exactly. And with Tarek, I effectively use Tarek, and yes, Tarek has built a better reputation, which helps massively because then that makes it easier for me to come into those conversations. If I'm wandering around with a guitar as well, it's like, hi, I'm a bard. I've got a reason to exist and be here, which helps, facilitate those types of conversations. But yeah, for my first 2 years, I stayed with my hall in my nation, and we'd occasionally have a wander around, but I wouldn't know how to start a conversation. with another group or another hall.
Bit of a tangent, but I was going to ask you, as I've got the opportunity to have you here, what's the etiquette on approaching? If I see you with your guitar and I'm like, crack us a song, what's the etiquette on that? Right, like
Yeah, you don't want to be like, here's some money, dance for me, monkey, do you?
Yeah,
right?
right,
Like you don't want to be that
kind of
way
guy,
about
right?
it. Yeah.
Like, how do you approach it?
So it depends how fast I'm walking and how knackered I look at the time.
I assume if you're walking anywhere, it's not a good time. But if you're maybe at a campfire or something, is it different? Or
yeah, I mean, generally, I think the only times I'll refuse to perform, because being asked to perform is a massive honor. I mean, I'm fully aware that, and I keep saying I'm going to relate this to Tarek, not me, but that people have latched onto Tarek and have liked his shtick. But there's never a time when I will not be flattered by people asking for a song, especially if they want to throw money at me as well. And it sometimes gets a little bit difficult just where money is involved, because there's still imposter syndrome, and in terms of, oh no, I can't possibly ask for money. But yeah, asking people for a song, I'm saying this for myself and other people,
yeah,
I can't imagine anyone will ever be offended or annoyed by that. For myself, the only times when I will politely decline will be either because I have completely lost my voice, which does happen on a fairly regular basis. I have literally written songs or poems, things that I can sing depending on how fucked my voice is,
right.
with a specific purpose in mind. Or if someone else is performing, because again, I still want to encourage and facilitate other people performing. I don't want to, hog the space and it just become the Tarek show, because that's boring for everyone. But I think any time like that, it's like asking people. It's cool, especially if it's quiet and sort of, hey, give us a song. I mean, the worst that's going to happen is politely say no. What is interesting, and goes back to the money stuff, and you saying, hey monkey, dance, throw money, do the thing, insert money, song comes out. Is some people feel awkward dealing with money, which is difficult when prosperity and pride are virtues.
Yeah.
And that's great game design, because it means that you can use those virtues to boost your confidence in these areas.
People really struggle with I struggle with value at Empire, and I think it's it's honestly, it's haunting listening to you talk about this stuff, because it's like, but both me and Ian have definitely resonated with like what you're saying in a number of different ways, right? The idea of being confident in some aspects and not others, right? Imposter syndrome, asking for potential money. Like, bear in mind, we have a patron now, right? And I've had a very mixed relationship with just the idea of receiving money. Like, I would prefer to spend £1,000 a year on the podcast than ask someone for £2 a month, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where my mentality is at, because so and listen to you talk, and believe me, you're a very talented performer, right? Like, it's an absolute treat to listen to you sing, and we can't thank you enough. Like, honestly, we joke about fanboying, but the reason why we're doing that is because of how wonderful our memories of what you managed to create into what was at the time a very grim scene, right? Like, we were very tired, wet. We were in a tent because we had nowhere else to go, right? Like, it was like we didn't have a fire at the time, no awning. It was just a cold, damp campsite, all where we were, and we were low. So to hear someone come in and just nail it down, but I think that's very interesting. I think we should always remember. We actually recorded an episode with Justin Talisma, who played Kjartan. He's a very well known. Unfortunately, the audio was so bad. But one thing I got struck about that was similar vibe.
Even that in itself is like, what's that? You couldn't hear Justin?
No, the problem this is the problem. We've had lost episodes due to the nature of recording, which is a pain in the arse. We're learning as we go, but still, sometimes it's frustrating. But it's interesting to see what from the outside seems a very confident person who's pushing themselves to their absolute limits. And you just can't tell because they're doing so good. That happens a lot at Empire. Generals, senators, performers. It's that everyone's doing this thing, and a lot of them are pushing themselves to the absolute hilt. So I think it's interesting to remember, and I hope it gives other people confidence that we all get scared It's the pushing ourselves past that line and pushing ourselves. And that might be small steps. That might be very small steps.
At risk of spoilerizing my own stuff, literally the song that I'm like a hair's breadth away from finishing at the moment is about imposter syndrome. And that realization that everyone else is the same. We're all bullshitting our way through this. Especially Empire, where we're literally pretending to be people. So if you're pretending to be someone who's able to pretend to be someone else, great, go full Inception, go as many layers down as you need to in order to find what you do, and use the virtues, use them as a crutch, as a lever, as justification, whatever.
It's just enough distance for a lot of personal growth, right? And I think that's what it's why kids play, it's why we role play, is to kind of like to simulate these experiences and these feelings, right? In what is actually, it might seem to us because we're living it, it seems very stressful, but really it's a very safe environment to kind of express yourself in, right? Like if you like the first, like the only story I've done at Song and Stories was a limerick, right? For the sole purpose, it's written down. If it goes wrong, I'm there for 10 seconds and I'm out, right? Like, I walk in, hello, Navarre, they say hello back. I gave a bit of chat about writing a limerick and then read the limerick and then said, strength for the Empire, bam, strength for Navarre, I'm out, drop the mic, I'm done, right? Like, and that's all I had the courage to do. It wasn't because I knew that would just be, it's easy. That was because it was the smallest, easiest thing I could possibly manage to get in front of that crowd and not call it off, right? Now having done that, my confidence is growing. In fact, I relish the chance to go and tell a story at Songs and Story. I'll still be shitting my pants when I'm making on the side, trying to make eye contact with Gabby or Sam or whoever else is in the circle trying to get out there. And I'll be very scared. But you may not be able to tell that I'm scared. You might just enjoy it.
I promise you now, I've been performing in some capacity, whether it's bands, theatre, gigging, whatever, in some capacity since I was like 16, 17. What you're describing there, that's slight shitting it, that slight terror just before you start, will never go away. Just accept it. Yeah. You're never going to get over that fear, but it's momentarily. And you do it often enough to the point where you know the reward is worth that moment of fear.
It's a win every time. It's a win. It's a win when you do it. It's and you train yourself to enjoy that win, expect the win, and when it's still scary, but the win is still worth it. Sorry, I was interrupting.
No. That hint of adrenaline is tied to that, though. I think that's the thing, right? Like it's necessary. Otherwise, you wouldn't give a shit. Yeah. And if you didn't give a shit, it wouldn't be an authentic expression. And that ultimately all we're trying to really do is find a way to express ourselves in an honest capacity, and that can have so many different ways to do it. But when you're singing a song, of course you're nervous. Yeah, you're performing in front of a lot of people, and that's the way it is. But hopefully you can get through it, and we love it.
Ian, I love the way that it's very true what you just said about the looking for a way to express yourself. I've become very interested in this. Like it's and that's part of why I love LARP is podcast aside, just in the game is like, how do I express? Can I sing? I wanna sing, right? Like. That's become, I want to do poetry, I want to do art, I want to do other things in an in-character setting, but definitely part of, like, it's interesting to me, and I want to find a million and one different ways to express myself in the game of LARP, and I think that's something really fantastic that I'm still getting used to. Like Ian, you singing at the end of that the actual history episode, which we brought up at the beginning. I didn't know you were going to do that, and it fucking blew my mind. Like when I listened to it, because I listened to it like straight up like everyone else did. We released Ian sent me the files, and I released it like everyone else listened to it, and I was just like, God damn, son, that's like my homeboy, like that's absolutely smashing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, look at him, he's doing it, he's fucking doing it, right? And I think that's something really nice about how supportive that vibe is at Empire. Like when I come off having done my 10 seconds of limerick, like my guys, my small little part of this thing are ecstatic for me, right? Like there's people like seeing you push yourself and trying hard and succeeding. So
I think,
do it for them almost.
I think life can often train us to be embarrassed by the idea of being or having a degree of creativity. And when you talk to people, people can say, "Oh, I'm not a creative person," because and put that shield up. But if you think about it, ultimately, the human experience is a creative process. And when you add LARP, by virtue of you being there, having got some kit, got a character concept together, and gone onto the field and participated, however bland you may think your expression is, it's still a creative process that you're enabling within yourself, and a creative spirit that you're pushing out into the world. And you are a creative being. And I think often you can lose sight of the beauty of that can exist within you. And I think that's one of the true blessings of LARP, is the fact that it can hopefully give you a lens to maybe reassess that message that you've been sold through everyday modern life, that you aren't a creative person. You are, and you're worth all of it.
I joined this hobby with the expectation of going in, having a drink, having a fight, coming home. That was my expectation going into this hobby. That was all I cared about. It ended up with me not only forming like friendship bonds or reinforcing friendship bonds in a way that I never had before with my group is incredible. But also it got me writing songs for the first time in about 15 years. I hadn't written a song. I barely picked up a guitar. It got me doing that stuff. And that's what it got me doing. I've seen other people start writing, start performing, who've never done anything like that in the past, because they're inspired by seeing someone else do it, or telling a story, or taking a role on the battlefield, or pushing for cinema, or doing all these. As I say, it is creative. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a song. It doesn't have to be a physical object. It doesn't have to be anything in order for you to push this creative element. And LARP is waxing lyrical on the general merits of LARP at this point, but it's a safe space to explore those elements of our character, or elements of our character that we don't maybe know are there, but we want to find out.
And this can come out kits too, right? Even crafting kit. Just existing in the world as your character. That doesn't need to be a exuberant character. Just by trying to think differently about how you're approaching something, it's a wonderful self-study that I put in the almost the category of mindfulness and everything else, right? Like it has a very interesting effect on the soul,
I wanted to actually touch on something else that you brought up as well, because we've throughout the conversation, I think maybe you could get the wrong impression when we say that we spend a lot of time with our groups, inside our own groups and stuff. We certainly spend a lot of time just within the Ashbourne, hanging around with each other. And keep in mind, of course, that these are opportunities that can be quite fleeting in everyday life, to spend quality time with some of the people that you love the most. And that's definitely a huge element of LARP, or it can be if you go as a group. And if you don't go as a group, you'll find people who you can, who you'll become familiar with, and who you can form bonds with, and that's a huge part of the game, right? Like it's ultimately enjoying your time there with other human beings, and there's a huge worth to that.
Yeah, there are these huge spectacles, the massive battles, the big shouting sessions, the drama, the politics, all of that stuff. All of my most cherished memories of those events are being sat around a fire. Different fires, different groups, but they're all involved. When I think, why do I go to LARP? I think being sat around that fire with my crew around me, and it feels amazing. And we joke, we call ourselves the Action Fam, but it's true. I mean, we weren't formed icy. Our group are all people who the core group knew each other beforehand, and then more people have joined the group. But we are all people who've known each other out of character. We're out of character friends who've maybe invited another friend along, but generally it's everyone knows everyone. But those bonds have been strengthened. There's no shadow of a doubt. Even though some of my absolute best friends in the world are in that group, and they were my best friends before we started LARPing, but we've since had these shared experiences, some of them imaginary, but those ones have unquestionably been strengthened as a result of this silly game that we play. It's ridiculous.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the fact is, me and Dave, we used to live very close to each other. We've known each other since we were like 3. So it was always a case of like literally just walking around each other's houses and playing Lego and all that kind of stuff you do as kids. Life happens. Dave moves a bit further. I mean, he's not miles away. He's literally in Milton Keynes. So it's hardly any distance from Cambridge. But there is a natural, that hour-long journey.
I think this is part of growing up and adulting generally, right? Like, I totally agree. And even while we were just having that portion of the conversation, I was thinking about times that me and you have had, like specifically like weird things like we're both knackered and it's the end of the night, right? And you're getting into your camp bed, I'm getting into mine, and we're just like, we're fucking beat, man. With like too many beers, shouted too much during the day, we're tired, and we're just having a little me and you giggle at the day, And it's like, those are really nice experiences that I cherish, and they're not necessarily part of the game, right? But they're as real as anything else, right? Like that you get to experience.
It's a realist thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's
just that weird thing, and again, I'm being a little bit manipulative here. So one of the other songs I did, and again, sounds like me again, Nowhere to Rather Be, was very the intent behind that was to try and capture that, which is weird because you feel it icy as well. This isn't just an entirely abstract like OC feeling. The game is designed in such a way to foster those feelings with your character. So it's all about forming those bonds through the oaths, the shared actions, the shared experiences. Emotions are heightened, both icy and OC.
Empire's a cult. Empire's a cult, by the way, like 100%, right? Like it's a cult, and it's unfortunately it's done in a really healthy way. But it's there are some very cultish stuff that happens, right? I love my nation, I love my friends, and I love there's lots of things that I'm very passionate about in game that I'm genuinely passionate about. This isn't me putting it on. I'm not trying to pretend to be into this. No, I feel very strongly about this. Like if you said to me, we're not going to One Nation in England after lockdown, and you said to me like, some guys at the bar next to me were just like, we should forget the Valorn and just get on with the more important things in the Empire, I'll be like, what, motherfucker? Do you know what I mean? Like that's me. That's OC. That's not icy anymore. That's part of my soul. The Valorn must be destroyed at all costs. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's weird. I love it. I can imagine it can be too much, and I think doing it in a healthy and good way is like I never leave Empire and I'm just like fuming about shit, right? Like I'm really angry about something that I leave the game in the game, but I'll take on an awful lot of the positive, like unifying things and passions back into my real day life,
For me, it's the sights and the sounds of it. And just, how memory over time just can kind of blur into a kind of it becomes more of like a sensation, right? When you get those kind of memories that are just, if you said, oh, what's your memory of this event? I might not be like, pick out a couple of sort of visions and vistas and stuff. But when I truly, it's just the idea of it's a happy time in a space where I'm just having a great experience, right? And how often, do you really get to do that? I mean, we've all got jobs and all of those kind of things, the mundanity of life. But
speak for yourself. My life isn't mundane at all. No, I'm joking. Of course it is.
You know what I mean?
Of course it is. It's like everyone else's. There is a totally 100%. There's a mundanity to this stuff.
I think that's interesting. We've talked about the excitement elements of it, but just touching on that as well is that there's a peaceful element to Empire as well. Like, hugely peaceful. I mean, I've talked about going for a drink. I don't mean going for a rowdy drink. No, I mean go for a drink. sit.
Yeah.
Just go. You mentioned mindfulness earlier on. Just sit. Take it in. Two of my favorite images. One is seated in my brain. One is there are excellent photos of it. It's also seated in my brain. It's actually a bit of a tragedy for me right now because of where Wintermark is. When I'm driving onto the field, I go down the other way, which makes it a little bit of a cheat now. But what I always used to love was you'd see it early morning or that first time when you're driving up onto the site, and you know that road that leads down between the Navari Woods, basically down the middle of your campsite where you've got the Navari Woods.
Murder
on
Alley,
the
you
side.
mean? Murder Alley?
No, outside of the woods.
Oh, okay.
Outside of the woods. So the line between that and where you guys then border on the remains of Navarre,
Yeah.
and then leads on to the marches. That road down there, there's just enough elevation so as you first come around the corner and start driving down there, and you see Anvil laid out before you in the valley.
I know
And
what you mean, yeah.
just that point when you're coming over, I absolutely love that view, and it's one of my favorite views to be able to show people, especially new players.
That was my first interaction, like my first introduction to Empire, and it's still etched into my mind, like very much so. That thing where we drove down and we pulled slightly off, and we're trying to figure out we ended up going into the Orc camp, obviously, which is hilarious. And I love that. I love it now.
Everyone does it,
but it was like, yeah, that vista of looking over Empire is something that it's so wonderful. Yeah. By the way, listener, I'm very sorry if you came here for Wintermark. We're well off into talking about like what we enjoy about it and the psychological effects of it and all sorts of stuff. So apologies for that. But
I can link this back to Wintermark.
Stand by, Wintermark listener. We're gonna get this back on track, back on the rails.
So this will have been 2.5 years ago, I think it was. And this is the other image to see it in my brain, and I honestly don't know if there'll be another like it at Empire, where an opportunity, so a minor conjunction opportunity to come up that was going to allow people to travel from Anvil to the Calavesi swamps to inter some bodies in the swamps, which is what Wintermark people do with their dead. They inter them in the swamps. It's a very honourable thing. And it's like, okay, well, this will be quite cool. So basically, a bunch of us can go through the Sentinel Gate late at night and go into the swamp, which is up at the top of the field. And that'll be quite cool. And then people were like, well, it'll be quite late then. We should get some torches or some lights or something. So, okay. Well, and someone found a good line on getting some, candle torches. Like, oh, cool. And then a few more people got those. And a few more people did. And where you talk about there's a lot of Wintermark, I think there must have been like 500 or something of us. I don't know, however many there are. And this will have been about 8 or 9 p.m. So the sun had gone down. Pretty much the entirety of Wintermark assembled in our square. We lit our torches and we did the entire march from Wintermark up to the Sentinel Gate, through the Sentinel Gate, up to the very top of the field. Now imagine pitch blackness. You know how nice it is when you see those fires. Imagine several hundred Wintermarkers, most of whom have a flaming torch, processing through all of that. That in itself was just amazing sense of unity with your nation. Yeah. And then to go up to that far corner of the field where PD had outdone themselves in terms of set dressing. There was moody lighting. There was smoke. You genuinely believed you were on the edge of a swamp. And then they built like a little jetty so you could walk out.
What?
And I got to address the nation and speak on behalf of one of the fallen. And standing in the middle of this circle of flaming torches with mist and smoke and coloured lights and eerie bog spirits behind me. I am never going to experience anything like that in my life, and that was just incredible.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about, right? Yeah. Like those moments that you never capture them in.
Yeah, we should wrap this up.
Yeah, we should wrap it up there, but that's a great image to leave.
I think that's a really nice point to put it at. Yeah, the imagination of what's achievable with the VR helmet that is LARP is incredible. Yeah, I think we could talk on for a really long time, which is getting to a really bad habit. I've been trying to do these where it's between 45 minutes and an hour and a half, and I've failed so miserably at this.
In as well, Dave. That was the other problem, because you've been doing the other ones on your own, and then you were like, "Oh yeah, do you want to pop in and do this one?" And I was like, as well.
But bad. I knew this one was going to be a bad one. Like Pud was hyped for it. I know me and you were hyped for it. It was always going to go this way, and I'm so glad we did get to have this conversation. And hopefully, if you're listening and you haven't dozed off on the couch, or if you have, you're welcome. You're welcome if you did doze off, right? But thank you very much for joining us, Pud. We're gonna try and continue to do these like nation episodes, so we can learn as we go, and hopefully you'll learn something along. But I think this is a great conversation to highlight. Like, we're still hyped for LARP. Like, we miss it so much. We're counting down the days. Hope is here. Vaccines coming. Things are looking good, people. Keep it together. We're going to be all right, you know. So, right. Is there anything closing anything you guys want to say before we leave?
No,
just
good.
No, look forward to seeing people in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. We should try and do thank you very much to our patrons, by the way. I mentioned them earlier about all of that stuff, and thank you so much for continuing to support us. There was some new people are supporting us, which is really nice in the long dark, which is bonkers, right? Because anyway,
you're performing a good service.
Well, we're trying the best we can. What is a traditional, because we usually end these things out with like strength for the Empire, strength for Navarre, and I think it would only be right, Ian. I think it would only be right if we did something similar, but for the winter marker.
Just this once.
Just this once, Ian. Just this once, buddy. We don't have to. This isn't, what it is. So what's the general custom? Is it 3 nations?
3 people, 1 nation.
So we just say 1 nation when it's our point, okay?
3 people,
1 nation!
You did what?
We caught it sleeping. You weren't wrong about the size of the thing.
Or how many teeth it had.
You all look like you're in one piece. So, what happened?
Let me tell you a story. These 2 were quaking in their boots.
Hey!
We were not.
I snuck up on it, quiet like. I raised my axe, and just before I could strike, a snake wrapped round my leg.
A snake? A tree root, more like.
Stop interrupting. This is my story. Anyway, the snake pulled me off my feet.
You fell over.
So, over I went, into the stinking bog. I managed to free myself from the snake's clutches, but I had lost me trusty axe. And that's when I noticed the beast was awake.
I thought we were all goners.
Right.
I got back on my feet. I stood there, face to face with the creature. It was all muscles and teeth.
Bryn was covered head to toe in swampweed and branches. Tell him what you did then.
I will if you stop interrupting. I looked straight in its eyes and gave it the old Bryn stare.
It was actually very impressive.
The beast knew it had met its match, and it just took off running.
Like a kid caught scrumping.
Exactly like that.